Milgard Success Center and the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, together with Amazon, are proud to host our first ever Pathways for Women in STEM Career panel here at UW Tacoma. This event has been made possible through the generous contribution of Amazon. Thank you, Amazon. Welcome also to the local Tacoma High School students who will be watching this recording later. I would like to introduce our very special panel of women in STEM careers. Paige Martin, Finance Manager, US Softlines, Amazon. Renee Burton, Principal Threat Intelligence Engineer, Infoblox. Erin Golino, Chief Financial Officer, Port of Tacoma. And Gauri Patel, Technical Product Manager, Forum Solutions, and Milgard alum. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome our Chancellor, Sheila Edward Lang. Welcome, Chancellor. So we have about 50 minutes with the panel, and here is how it will flow. Each panelist will introduce themselves, where they work, the job they do, and they will share a personal story of their journey as a female STEM student. They will touch upon key decisions they faced and how they overcame them in their career paths, why they pursued postgraduate education, if they did, and how it helped them, whether they had mentors guiding them through the process, and finally, they'll conclude with one piece of advice they wish they had when they were a student. After they touch upon these points, there will be a little bit of time for question and answers. We'll conclude at 1:30, and then the panel will be available for informal discussion. So without any further ado, take it away, ladies. Thank you.
So I'll start off with introduction. I'm Erin Golino, and I currently am the Chief Financial and Administrative Officer for the Port of Tacoma, which is a state agency. We're an independent municipal corporation governed by elected officials, and our mission is really to create jobs. And so under that, I have a number of things, finance, accounting, contracting, security. So it's a fairly broad set of activities. And how did I get to this journey? I started on this path about 12 years ago in this role. But before that, it was really about, when we talk about STEM careers, in high school, I really determined that I liked accounting. And so that was a path forward for me. And so I went to the University of Puget Sound and got an accounting degree. And then at that time, a lot of it was really geared towards your only path was public accounting. And what I figured out was that wasn't the path for me. So I went to Weyerhaeuser Company as an internal auditor. And over about 23 years, held a number of different jobs, from financial analyst to marketing analyst to internal audit director to systems finance lead. And so that journey really started with that passion for accounting and what I could do with it, and then looking for a company that I really, truly admired, which was Weyerhaeuser. And through that, like I said, that kind of led me to the Port of Tacoma. So I've been in the South Sound now for working over 30 years, and through that have become a very solid part of the South Sound. So I'm quite involved in the university, and I think education is a huge game changer. So thanks.
Hi, my name is Gauri Patel, and I currently work with Forum Solutions for a large global technology client as a technical product manager. My journey with education started with being a graduate, bachelor's in engineering. And then I worked at TCS back in India for around 5 years as a software consultant or software engineer. While I was working there on this major project, which is basically trading applications for government stocks and bonds. So only banks trade on those stocks and bonds, and we were developing those software applications for them. I was encountering massive amounts of data and how insights from those data were used to make key business decisions. Towards the end of my job experience with TCS, I was working on a data migration project, and I realized I'm really interested in what these massive, huge data sets hold, like what insights and what observations can we make from them. And 10 years fast forward, we are generating massive amounts of data. We are using data analysts and data analysis, dashboards, everywhere. Even our mobile phones nowadays gives us the time that we spend on social media. That's an example of data analysis. And last year, I decided to go back to school with Milgard. I completed my master's in business analytics, and they're working on applied project. I also realized I'm very good at understanding customer requirements, what their pain points are, what their problems are, and helping my team. Even though I was working on building those solutions, I was more into designing or understanding those requirements exactly translated into what kind of products or solutions we can build for them. So fast forward to right now, I'm working on a project which is a data collection it started with COVID-related surveys, but we are more towards building inspections or database for these sites, not retail sites, but these sites all over the globe where you inspect buildings or any spaces, office spaces, whether they are suitable or whether they are prepped to go back to offices and normally maintained with kind of inspections that would tell you that, okay, this building is maintained well, the customer experience of an employee working on this building is maintained well, and that's what I'm doing right now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Okay. I'm Paige Martin, so I'm from Indiana originally. I went to IU for my undergrad and MBA, and I actually come from a family who doesn't have any kind of college education, so I was always determined to go to school. I truly believe with what Erin said, that like education in school is a game changer. It's changed my life a ton. It took me to Arizona, where I got to work for Intel, and right now where I work for Amazon. While I was in school, I did my undergraduate and MBA together, so I did a 5-year program where you did 3 undergrad and 2 MBA. I'm kind of jealous of you being able to go back to school now because I miss college, and I always thought, like, I'm not ever going to want to go back, so let me get it all done in one swoop. So that definitely saved me a year and kind of, like, established my career trajectory. I interned at Intel in Phoenix and then went back after I graduated for 3.5 years, and I got to work in, like, the Internet of Things group where we looked at kind of low-end processors to figure out where we want to kind of grow in the Internet of Things space. And then in 2018, I made the decision to come up here and work for Amazon, and it was the best decision I've ever made in my career for sure. Since then, I got to grow our delivery station network, so any package you get delivered to you from Amazon comes through, like 50% come through our delivery stations, and when I started, we had probably 40 stations, and I got to kind of own the launch and expansion of about 200 or 300 stations since then. My CapEx budget was about $10 billion, which is insane to think about. I got to grow a team from nothing to 15 by the time I left. So that was a ton of fun. Right now I'm in our soft lines, which is kind of jewelry, watches, shoes, fashion space for Amazon, and it's the retail space, so definitely very different than the operation space. And here I get to work on things like what kind of products do we want to sell through 1P, and how do we want to partner with our vendors, and I get to own a full P&L end-to-end, 3 P&Ls actually, and I always figured I want to do that if I want to be a CFO someday somewhere. You definitely need P&L experience, so Amazon is a cool company because you get to work on so many massive material things at early on in your career, and it's just been a ton of fun.
Hi. Let's see. Okay. I'm Renee Burton. I am with Infoblox, and I am the head of threat intelligence there as of today. Up until then, the last couple of years, I was the lead data scientist for Infoblox. Some of you are probably familiar. Our Tacoma office is right there. And that's where my team is. I'm a remote worker, so I actually do live in North Seattle, and I do not and have not come here. I just moved to the Seattle region from Maryland this spring, so fairly new to this area as well. So to give a little bit of background of where I am and how I'm moved around, I did my graduate work in mathematics. I came from Alaska. Similar to these guys' statement about education, I actually grew up in a single-parent household below the federal poverty line, and In order for me to be successful, it was really taking a lot of mentorship from a variety of people over time, and in particular was lucky enough to go to graduate school where I went in New York and finished my PhD in math there. And at that time, there was a slump in the math community in terms of there was tons of people coming from Eastern Europe with PhDs, very smart people. So I decided to go into government. There was a lot of opportunities for mathematicians at the National Security Agency. It's an amazing place if you're a mathematician or a computer scientist to be an incredible talent pool there. And I spent 22 years there. And I guess sort of similar to Amazon, right? I had the opportunity to do all the things. So I lived overseas, I was a mathematician, I did cryptography. I went in and out of management and into individual contributions, worked in computer science, started multiple organizations as kind of an internal startup situation. And then I decided in 2018 as well to leave government and see what it was like, particularly because we knew we were coming to the West Coast eventually. So I joined Infoblox in May of 2018 as a data scientist there, and helped grow that group of people. And it's been a really interesting, exciting time. And now transitioning back to management to run their intelligence program is going to be another interesting challenge.
Okay, thank you everyone, and I'm just going to volunteer here to be the MC. The next point that I would like our panelists and myself to touch on is any key story or key factor that shaped your decision to enter into STEM as a woman, and a personal touch to that story would be very helpful.
Great, thank you. You know, I mentioned a little bit about high school and accounting, and I graduated from high school in the early 80s, and by that time I would say accounting, I mean, I love that accounting is considered a STEM. I'll just tell you that right now. But it was not necessarily, I mean, it was more normal for women to be going into that field, although there really weren't a lot of leaders. So, so at the time, the big thing was get your accounting degree, get your CPA. And, the big choice was, again, go public accounting, and that was kind of the big, bright and shiny path. But the more important thing was to know yourself. And so for me, it was, I wanted to anchor myself with a company that I really liked, that gave me options. I was proud of who they were. I felt they would invest in me. And I think I heard some themes here around employers. So the thing I would say is choose wisely. It is less about the first job and more about the employer, in my opinion. And I think that has held true for me. So when I started looking at not public accounting, well, Weyerhaeuser was right up the street. It was at the time about an $8 billion company. In my lifetime there, it grew to about $23 billion. Now it's slightly smaller as it's become a real estate investment trust, but it treated its people like its product. It grew everything from the inside. It looked long-term. It invested in its people. So, I take this internal audit job, and I'm out in the field in Plymouth, North Carolina for 6 weeks, or, some other area, remote area where they have mills, and I got to see what the company did. But I always got to come back to the anchor of, Federal Way was their main campus. And so with that, in internal audit, then I got plucked off to another opportunity, and then it led it to something different. And so the key was that launching pad was really being thoughtful about who you're going to give your time and talents to. That's the thing you can start with. And then how you take some risks with that. And so I never had to really take risks. I've only had 2 employers in my lifetime. Because I got to do all these different things, and I was always with Weyerhaeuser, but because it was such a wonderful partnership in terms of growing and learning and taking on different opportunities, and I worked myself out of a job probably half a dozen times. And so in late 2009, when Weyerhaeuser was going through some significant downsizing, there just wasn't the right opportunity for me, and that's what led me to the port. I always tell the people, my first interview, the port of Tacoma they laid off 20% of the workforce, they had canceled a major construction project, their executive director was leaving because they were at odds with the elected board, and they were implementing a new financial system. And I went home to my husband and I said, I think I have to do this. Because I had done all those things. And if I could just come in and bring my, so I kind of went the private to government. Could I bring all of those experiences I had into something that really helped the community and I would find fascinating? So I would just, again, anchor it in, think about, you deserve to partner with somebody who's going to give back to you. And that is probably the most important decision you could make that sets off a career path because it leads to other opportunities. The last thing I'll say is, because I went to work for Weyerhaeuser, I met my husband. We're now, we've been married 31 years. We have a 28-year-old daughter and a 26-year-old son. So I can't emphasize enough that as you're thinking about, that career path, it can feel so daunting, but just dial it down into those couple of key things. What is most impactful to you in terms of where you want to invest your time?
Thank you. My story or my decision would go way back to when I entered graduate school, undergraduate school as engineering. And I think something that really shaped my decision was not that I was, good in subjects at school, but it was the other projects or other school summer camps that I took in between school summer holidays or grades. And I was very interested into fixing things somehow. Like I would just take this random, tape recorder and try to fix it, or some other gadget that's just lying around and try to fix it. I got even those electric shock a couple of times. But that's what made me very much curious about building things, that, okay, how is this product designed? And I would love to know what's the engineering behind it. And from a family where there are no engineers, like not just women, but like no men engineers too. Our families were mostly into small local businesses, and we were also supposed to, at the max, if women have career, it is teachers, nurses, these even accounting, those careers where you're supposed to stay close to home, where you're brought up. And I chose to go to a school which is far away from my hometown or home area, and that was, I think, the biggest challenge for me, to get admission. And even though my caliber or my scores got me admitted into school, it was more of that taking that decision against what path is actually being chosen for you. And that was my fight, my major fight. Something that helped me there was knowing that I'm good at this, and even though no one has done it before, I am choosing my own path. So I always say this, that don't try to fit into something or some career which you would have to mold your skills and talents, but try to see if that career path fits your skill sets and your talents. And that's how I got into STEM, that, okay, I am good at fixing things. I am curious at learning how things are designed, what engineering goes behind it, or even at my job experience ahead, that I want to know more about data. Then I came into business analyst and learned more about data analysis. So that's how I tried to see what is fitting my skill sets and my curiosity or my skills at that time.
So I think that's a super important thing to just think through, is like be flexible with your kind of decision and do what makes you happy and passionate and that interests you, because that's truly what makes you fulfilled in your career. I've always been good at math. It's always been something that I always knew my career was going to be math-based. I actually originally was going to go to Purdue for aeronautical engineering because I love space and NASA. I was on homecoming court and they announced that I'm going to be a rocket scientist. That didn't happen. So that changed. I went to IU instead for friends, not the right reason, but I went there. And then I took the kind of entry-level accounting course. I went undecided, took the accounting course, got 104% on the first one when like 75% of the class fails. I was like, maybe I'll pursue this. And so I kind of went the accounting path. Then I learned that there's finance, and that's different than accounting. Maybe I should do both. And then I found out there was a 3-2 MBA program, so I went down that path too. So I kind of made those decisions real time as I was in it, because it interests me. I was good at it. I had a ton of fun doing it. I actually was going to go Big Four originally, which is a big kind of pressure when you're in your MBA working on your kind of CPA path. I just tried Intel because it was a summer internship, and worst case, I could go back to Big Four full time. I loved Intel. It was amazing. I got to have a seat at the business table with my business partners and drive influence and change through numbers, and I just had a blast. It was a great summer, so of course I went back. And so that kind of changed too, because originally I had been interviewing all with Big Four firms. Now I talk to my friends who are in Big Four, and they're like kind of doing audit and counting stuff, and it doesn't sound as fun as my job and the things that I've gotten to do, so definitely like the right decision for sure. I think in my career, like I've been in roles that I'm super passionate about and I love, and like I work day and night and weekends and have so much fun. I've noticed when I get in roles that I'm not as excited about, where it's kind of reporting and kind of day-to-day process, like I kind of get in a rut and I can do my job from 10 to 2, but it doesn't kind of fulfill me. So I think as you're going through kind of deciding what you want to do for a career, what you want to study, focus, where do you want to work, I think definitely tying that to your passions and interests is super critical just for your success and kind of fulfillment overall.
Yeah, let's see. So stories in terms of how I ended up in math and STEM in particular. So also similar age frame. In the early 1980s, we had computers suddenly coming out, and in particular, they were being put into libraries. So I had the opportunity in, I think it was middle school, that I could not go to a class, instead go to the library and teach myself, and then I would get credit for that. So that seemed like a rockin' thing when I was 12. And that's what I did. So by the time I ended up in high school, where they were now officially teaching programming classes, I already knew pretty much how to program. Knew reasonably well how to program. So that was, for the teachers at the high school, was sort of like, oh, cool. Now we have someone in our cool new thing, this computer science concept, that we can shepherd along. And they were super supportive, and essentially I started at the university just in computer science at ninth grade, only for those classes, on the mentoring of that faculty at the high school. So it really makes a huge difference in what the people around you, they're able to recognize and push you forward, and whether you're in an open environment. I happen to be lucky to be in that kind of high school where teachers were really supportive. I was also really active in Girl Scouts. I went through the whole Girl Scout program and Gold Award program. I think that's kind of the single most important thing in terms of empowering me to understand the role of women in our society and the ability that you could do anything. There's no doubt in my mind that Girl Scouts was the key to doing that. And then just kind of going forward, right, is really taking advantage of a changing circumstance. This is exactly what they were saying. So I am very organized, and I'm not in finance. And I used to like fun of myself that, I like to plan my spontaneity. So I would like think through all day long that I want to go to Dairy Queen, and then I'd wait, and then at 8 o'clock I'd say to my husband, I have an idea. Let's go to Dairy Queen. So spontaneous, right? So I learned over the years that you probably are better served by letting nature move you around. And by having people who I didn't know, I've never asked anyone, would you be my mentor or something like that. I just sort of was lucky enough to be involved with people, again, starting in Girl Scouts, who were interested in who you were and engaging them, and then taking that path and letting it go back and forth. And again, like for me, as of today, that's another path where I've gone from a really rewarding individual contributor position to now running our entire intelligence organization again. And I'm just going to see where that path goes, and then we're going to come back. So I encourage you to be a little more flexible than I am, but the Dairy Queen trick is very successful.
Thank you, everyone. The next thing I would like us to touch on is if we have postgraduate degree, I believe we all have, and then also any certifications that we got and why we chose to pursue them. And again, Renee, you touched on a good point about mentors. So if we could also share if we had mentors while pursuing our postgraduate or certification.
So you've all heard that I have an accounting degree, and then the next logical step often was CPA exam. Now, there are other paths to certification, depending on which way you go. And I think in the accounting field, certification is still, I think, a very logical and beneficial item to look at. So I would encourage that. And then for me, I think working after the certification for a while, the key areas I focused in that I would always advocate are invest in the soft skills. Invest, not, technical is important, but what differentiates you in terms of long-term success is, can you work with people? Can you understand people? Can you be self-aware of your own unique leadership style? So things that helped to me early on were really understanding the trainings around thinking style. I'm any kind of test you take that tells you whether you're an introvert, extrovert, the scale isn't large enough for me. So my energy comes from extroverted, from talking, from gathering information. Understanding how others react to that and balancing it was really important for me. And so those kinds of training, thinking style, understanding how people think, how people receive information is different than how I do, and how do I tailor my communication such that others can hear it. That is probably the most, especially in STEM, because we're all talking about technical stuff, and if you can take technical stuff and help other non-technical people understand it, you will be in demand all day long. That is probably one of the most critical things you can take away is the people you're going to be helping are people that are generally people not in the technical field. And, so invest in those skills. And then I think working for a while, I also had the opportunity to do Seattle University's Executive Leadership Program. And Weyerhaeuser was one of the founding companies that helped build that program. And that was a 9-month program where they brought probably about 22 to 24 individuals together in a cohort. And we really experienced our own leadership journey and how to be an effective leader and how to bring that back in our organization. So that was very impactful. I could have carried that on for a full MBA if I wanted to, but really I got out of that what was most impactful for me. And then right now, 20 years later, after I did that program, I'm actually part of the American Leadership Forum, which is a program that is similar in that you experience your leadership journey, but it's very community-based, and it's really, we're exploring at a very deep level diversity, equity, and inclusion, and access to resources, and so never stop learning. And like I said, and I would say sometimes it's less about the things you can put after your name, comes from the person that put CPA, but you don't need a bunch of certifications after your name to make a difference. You need to really understand how you can use your technical skills and help communicate with people and bring people along so they can make good decisions. And that's like kind of a well-rounded balance of where education and training comes. So.
That's great. Thank you. I'll touch on my postgraduate or graduate education, but before that, I would like to touch on certifications. And I find certifications very interesting because they are these small, short-term courses that give you a hint of what's inside that role or that area of education. And that exactly happened after my 10th grade, like way back, when I went to this course during my summer holidays was for programming or coding in HTML. And back then, we did not have that many computer courses in school back in India. So it gave me an idea of, oh, this is something that goes into coding. And if I found it really interesting that I was able to build a web page. And the thing I still remember is that mark you, which kind of tickers over the web page. So that really fascinated me. And that helped me set my intention. I would say that, I want to pursue something into computers, coding, or engineering that would give me this kind of work role or job role to interact with software. Later on, again, after I did my engineering, after I did my work experience as software consultant, again, I was working with massive amounts of data being generated. Data analysis was, again, not something that was back then. There were no Tableau or Power BI back then. It was mostly just SQL tables, and you could run SQL queries to get those reports, and PDF printed reports were actually sent to the client, and they would verify that, okay, these are the right totals for a day, for a week. And after moving to States, again, I wanted to do data analysis, or I wanted to learn more about data engineering, so I went to UW Seattle to get the certification in data analysis. So that was my peek into, again, what goes into data analysis or business analysis. And I found it very interesting. I did some R programming on there. I worked with Power BI to build a project. And that fueled my motivation to come and pursue a degree here at Tacoma. So that's how I got my graduate degree or postgraduate degree in Masters in Business Analytics. So from my experience, have learned, again, this curiosity. If you find something new while you're working in your job role, someone else, some side department or some other person who you make friends with, and you find their role interesting, a good way to try it out is taking a short course about it and seeing a hint of it, whether you like to do that work or not. And as Erin mentioned, those soft skills, definitely that is the transferable skills that go from one job role to another job role, and that's what you take with you. The tools will keep on changing, the programming languages, as I've seen over years of time, that they keep on changing. Something that you carry with yourself is, in software, I would suggest, is the logic behind it. Your mind works on the logic to put on those programming tools or languages. And that's what I would focus on. Also, simplifying things has helped me a lot. So I know that it is very difficult to explain things. My family still doesn't understand what I do at work. So when I try to explain them, okay, we are, if I had to explain my current role, that, okay, there is a building and I need to make sure that everything in it is fine. So there are people going and checking on a tool that inputs all of those checks into data, and then we look at it and see if there is going to be a problem, and we try to find a pattern. If every month in winter there is some problem with this particular building or if this particular area, and then we would try to fix it ahead of time. So this was an oversimplified version, but if you learn to do that, I think it goes a long way. And most leadership teams or people, they are there because they want to know certain things. And I know there is this saying that if you can explain someone something in 1 minute or 2 minutes, you have got it right. So I would say that would be my key takeaway.
So I told you all that I decided to get my MBA while I was in my undergrad. I think that it kind of depends on kind of where you're at in your life and career and kind of what interests you. Again, I think that, like, when I look back, I think my undergrad definitely gave me the, like, finance accounting foundation. My MBA was where I got the soft skills and learned kind of the people development and things like that. I would say one of my key mentors that changed my life was one of my professors in my MBA program, actually. He taught classes that were around, like, being professional in the workplace. We read a book called The Platinum Rule, which is don't treat others how you want to be treated, treat others how they want to be treated. And that really kind of helped me. It was a super insightful book if you guys haven't read it. We read a ton of books like that in my MBA program, which helped in my kind of career. And I would say it definitely springboarded my career trajectory throughout overall. And then kind of when you're in your career, you learn other things like people management, like working through others. Everybody works and learns differently. And I think one of the most interesting things is to learn as you're moving up in kind of the leadership role, how do you get work done through others versus do it yourself as an IC? So you kind of learn a lot along the way. I kind of treat mentorship. I'm not into like forced mentorship a lot. So I think that I have more than one mentor along my career who I go to for certain things. So I think you guys will find those people along your career path, and in college, take advantage of the resources around you here too, because it definitely was a game changer for me in terms of deciding what my path looked like. When probably 80% of my class went to either iBanking or Big Four, he was the one that kind of pushed me to the corporate world, just because he knows my personality and kind of where I would thrive and succeed. So he kind of helped guide my path there too. So definitely people have shaped my overall path along the way because of those relationships that I formed.
Let's see, so I think there were two questions. One is, why did you go to graduate school? And then, should people go to graduate school? And I got the second one of that quite a lot when I was in government. So the reason I went to graduate school is really unrelated to where I am now. I was, as an undergrad, in a liberal arts college in Los Angeles, again, coming from a impoverished, part of our society. To me, the professors were gods, essentially. They made such a difference in who I was and who I wanted to be that I aspired to be part of that. I really felt like if I could make an influence in a few people's lives, that would be all that I needed. So I went to graduate school specifically for the purpose of becoming a professor in a liberal arts college environment. And then I went through 5 years of graduate school and was met with the reality that basically the entire Eastern Bloc of the world, which is a very large number of people, were now flooding the market. And so there was no real chance for my husband and I were likely to get jobs, but we were unlikely to get jobs together for the approximately 10 to 12 years. And so for us, that wasn't a choice that we were going to make. Several of our friends did make that choice. And that's why we went on an alternate career path. So anyhow, that's why I went to grad school. When I was in government, I was very fortunate. I also did very well there. I was the youngest woman at NSA to make the senior executive service at the time. And so a lot of people ask me, like, should I go to graduate school? Will it be better for my career? And I probably have a little bit of a controversial response to that. I definitely don't think you should go to graduate school for your career. I think that's particularly in math. Graduate school in mathematics, pure mathematics, is extraordinarily hard. And it's not a fun experience. It is not going to make a difference in your career over the long haul. So the lessons that you learn in graduate school, you could learn in your working environment as well, in my opinion. Do you really want to be a mathematician? Is that really what you want to do? Then absolutely you should go into graduate program. In math, you don't really do master's programs, so it's pretty much like you go to graduate school and you get a PhD. It's not really a master's isn't really a thing for pure mathematics. Applied mathematics is a little bit different. So that's a big decision, right? You're like investing 5 years of your life in order to try and get some payoff. What I did get out of graduate school was a couple of things that I think you can also learn as you work through life, or if you have a natural ability to do so. And that is incredible determination that you can actually accomplish anything that you set your mind to with the help of others, which is really what you need there. But also the mindset that I can't solve this problem, but I can solve this little variation of that problem, or I can solve some toy variation. As I move more into computer science, that actually was ridiculously helpful, and that is one of the advices that I give most of my employees who are mostly computer scientists is, okay, you can't solve that problem, right? We're not going to solve world peace, so let's see what we can do at our local food bank, right? Our World Hunger, we're going to do our local food bank. So really focusing on that, how do I divide a problem and make it smaller? that definitely came out of the maturity of graduate school.
Thank you so much. I forgot to touch on the mentor part. I did not have to have a mentor while choosing STEM, but I did have a mentor in MSBA through our women's initiative, and it was a wonderful experience. So I do urge people to go and get a mentor, learn from them, and that's very helpful. Being said that, I would like us to move towards more personal experiences, as in what were the challenges, or what was the biggest challenge or obstacle that you faced as a woman in STEM career, and how did you overcome it, or how did you navigate through it?
Thanks. And I did forget to talk about the mentors as well. And the interesting thing for me, I've never had a woman as a mentor. And, but I was fortunate that I had several men that really allowed me and encouraged me to be me. So, you know, that's kind of the message, is how do I be a better version of me, not somebody else? And, you know, and I think that kind of leads into the challenges I had, because early on, you know, I'm going into when you're new in a situation, you know, you're supposed to kind of sit down, be quiet, and just do your thing. I don't do that well. So early on in my career, it was learning, you know, I was always asking, well, why? Why are we doing it this way? What is it about this should we do it this way? And, you know, that was a challenge for me early on in my career, but it ultimately paid off for me because those were really the skill sets that propelled me over time into more leadership roles, was that curiosity, that desire to kind of ask the hard question, to not just go along, to kind of push the boundaries. And Weyerhaeuser at the time in the early 80s was really making a push. There were very few women in leadership roles. And they were open and thoughtful about how do we change that. And so I kind of got to be part of that, what they called a wave at one point, or where there were women, especially in the finance community, that were kind of learning and developing and eventually went into leadership roles. And so, you know, that's something that I think was really important to me. And it was a challenge for me, is how do I kind of understand who I am, how I communicate, and how I can understand what others' communications needs are. And then, you know, the other piece too for me was in the early 90s, I was a working mother, and about having the courage to make the choice to put yourself first. Too often you see where you're trying to do it all, and the most impactful thing you can do sometimes is go, you know what, I can't do that, but let's talk about how we get it done. Or that's not realistic. So always looking about what work is not necessary. And, you know, that's where the process piece comes into play, really understanding the root cause so you can really effectively solve problems. Because, you know, the whole concept of working to live is really, you know, something that I embraced. I wanted to work, I enjoyed working, but my family, you know, was my number one priority. And that was a challenge. You know, there was a thought, you know, you're not going to be able to step into a leadership role if you have to make those choices. You know, I never wanted to move out of the Northwest, so I strategically took some positions where I traveled and had the opportunity to gain some invaluable experiences without having to relocate. But I was never willing to take a position to move, because for my family, that was our commitment. So it's knowing those. I always think about the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and which is still, I think, a great book. And in there, talk about the big rocks, you know, those things that are most important to you. And when you know those big rocks, then you can stop worrying about the smaller stuff, and really focus on those things, and that helps you make decisions. So a lot of my challenges early on were making those bold choices where you know, I was going to find ways to get work done and find balance. And ultimately what I found was that successfully put me in opportunities where I could solve problems, which then opened up other opportunities. And I was actually the first woman director of internal audit at Weyerhaeuser. And it was right about that time that then after that we had another key leadership role. And then a couple years later, the CFO of Weyerhaeuser was a woman. So I got to see that transformation. And it was, but it really was about having the courage to say, it's not just working harder, it's working smarter. And part of working smarter is saying, you know what, I can't get all that done and be successful at work and away from work. So what other ways can we do that? And if you focus on, that's really what people want. They want solutions.
Thank you. That's amazing. For me, I would say the biggest challenge was walking into a room and finding that I am the only woman in that place. So my engineering stream was instrumentation, and there were 15 out of 75 students who were women. In my workplace, again, a similar thing followed, where you are in a team where very few are women. And I think my family or my generation, I am the only girl child, and all other cousins are guys, and that kind of prepared me for this environment where I'm walking in and all other are men, and then how do I still get my voice across, or how do I still not feel intimidated but give my opinion. Even in teams right now, or previously in my job experiences, I have had where majority of them are men, and through those situations or circumstances, I think I got kind of used to that environment, that, okay, even though there are more people who are giving a male perspective on a particular decision to be made or a particular problem to be solved, and another perspective or a diverse perspective, as I would say, is important. I read some time back in a survey where it mentioned that empathy is one of the most important leadership skill that gets you through. And I feel that we, as women, bring that to the table. Nothing against men, but this balance of both a fighting spirit and a nurturing spirit together brings the best in solutions that we design in STEM. And that is really important from my side, like looking at a solution or a product or what is going to market, which kind of influences our lifestyles and our lives in big picture, is really a critical piece, and we bringing that perspective or opinion as a woman is important. Thank you.
I can give you a real-time experience of that point, actually, about empathy. I think one of the best pieces of feedback I got from one of my first managers at Amazon was, Paige, people don't want to work for robots, they want to work for humans. I was very ambitious, and I do think being surrounded by men in a male-dominated industry, you kind of become that way to just succeed and thrive. And so I had to take a step back and be like, okay, I need to ask people about their day, and go in with a friendly face and not be all action, task-oriented. So that was a challenge. I would say I'll talk about a kind of a recent challenge in the past couple of years at Amazon. I've always have been in male-dominated fields, and so I'll never forget one time I was in a room with my VP as their finance manager support, and it was him and his directs, and there were probably 20 of them in the room, all male, and I had it was very eye-opening for me because I never kind of paid attention to that. The culture and that team was very much my way or the highway kind of leadership, and being a female and a support arm, not an actual kind of decision maker in the room, it's hard to kind of impede your decisions and influence decisions there when you're kind of the one voice out, I guess. And so I think one of the biggest things that taught me in that role was to be able to navigate through others and escalate where needed. I think being able to work across org and working through your management chain and figuring out how to continue influencing in the right direction without that initial buy-in in that kind of a dominated industry was something that I had to learn in that role, and it was super valuable and has helped me today as well. So I think while you're going through those experiences, you kind of learn different things along the way depending on the roadblocks you encounter.
Yeah, so I think similar to folks here, I was very lucky when you're in a male-dominated field, which math and computer science and threat intelligence is almost exclusively a male field, your mentors are going to be male. There's pretty much no way around that. And for me, that worked really well. Having people who are interested in you is really important. Seeking out anyone that you can and getting a broader network, which includes women and other genders in an environment, I think is really important. Since I was always in that context, it really wasn't something that I thought too much about, right? I've always been the one or two in the room, and I'm also pretty self-confident, so I didn't worry about it in that way. I'm pretty much a bull in a china shop kind of personality. That helps, unfortunately or fortunately. I think in some ways there's also this reverse flip of gender normative views of how women should be, and particularly women in leadership positions. In some degrees, people think of it as being, oh, you're going to be more masculine, but there's also a notion that you should be more, within the female community, women community, you should be more female, whatever that means. So I am not that gender normative in particular. And so I found myself in a kind of a weird place over time where I don't really relate to either people. I found my way through that, and I have a lot of response. So a lot of mentorship through time. I think we just have to ask ourselves over time, like, what does this mean to be a woman in STEM, and also what does it, mean to have mentors who are male or female, or what does that even mean? Are we holding expectations either way that are unreasonable? And try to be open-minded. And I think your mentorship is just going to come from anywhere that you allow it to come from, including your peers and your subordinates. So as I told you, I just took this new job today, and the people I went and got advice from were mostly the people who would be working for me going forward. I wanted to get their perspective. So that is a different way to just think about mentorship rather than the way we often think about it in a formal way.
That's great. Thank you so much. I forgot about turning the mic on. Thank you so much. And now you would like to open it for questions. I think there is a mic down there.
Hello, hi. So for those of you in leadership positions, my question is, do you feel like you faced more imposter syndrome, like being a woman? And if so, how did you overcome that?
It's a really interesting question because, the old term, fake it till you make it. I would say growing up in my early leadership roles, it was still kind of a culture where, you couldn't show your vulnerability. And I think then it's evolved in terms of embracing your own, so I've gone into other leadership roles where you just go, I'm not the expert. I'm here to help you. And so I think that kind of owning where you are in the journey kind of helps balance that. I kind of smile because I have a 26-year-old son who now works as a field service engineer. It's his first career position now out of college, and he was telling me kind of how he feels sometimes this imposter syndrome. And so it's not just limited to women, and I think it's that kind of finding and embracing that it's okay that you're learning, and that accepting that you bring certain things, but you don't have to bring everything.
I think, if I'm not wrong, the definition of imposter syndrome itself says that you know more, and that's why you have that low confidence, right? So imposter syndrome in itself would mean that just because you have more knowledge and you know more, you kind of feel lesser or inferior. And if someone would, had less knowledge and believe that, okay, this is right, that person would be very confident. Yes, definitely. I have had huge imposter syndrome. I undermine my skills a lot and overestimate my challenges to make bigger them in my head. And I say this, that there are already challenges out there a lot for women or people from diverse backgrounds, and we need to overcome them. So anything that is internal and making that as an excuse for not moving forward or not progressing or not putting in efforts is not acceptable. That's basically not an option for us. So that's how I tackle it.
So I just want to go back to a point that Erin made, actually, because I was in a role at Intel where my manager was the manager of someone who was like a subject matter expert in everything, and they struggled to kind of move up and navigate in their career, and he would continually undermine her in meetings, and I would see it. And she's very, very vocal and is like, hey, I'm the person who, I'm not always the smartest person in the room, but I'm here to make sure that the smartest people in the room are here having the right conversation. And so she kind of viewed it as like her kind of navigating, which is what you do as you move up in a leadership position. You kind of navigate, how do you get the right people in the room, make sure the right conversations are being had, even if you're not the subject matter expert. So that was super insightful for me to understand, like, you don't have to know everything. You just need to make sure that you can kind of navigate all of that along the way.
Yeah, I think similarly. So in particular, I ascribe to a community that comes out of Michigan Ross Business School. And that leadership, they have a variety of books. In particular, one of them is Building the Bridge as You Walk on It. So that notion of leadership is an engagement style in which you are saying from the beginning, like, hey, we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to have to change course at various points. I have found particularly, I work prefer to work in a startup-y kind of environment. That's where I get the most energy. And I found that employees respond very well to that kind of environment, especially if you say, like, I am looking to you to explain to me what we should be done, and then I'm going to take that on for you. That has worked very, very well for me in the past. And just having an ownership, being very clear. I do find, honestly, that with a lot of people, both in government and in private industry, there's a tendency to not want to look bad, I guess. I don't know. So people will often try to dance their way through something that they really just don't know what they're talking about. That's not my style, and I have found so far it's worked for me to just say, like, not my area. I'm a mathematician, and that's what I encourage people to do, is just a lot more honest about who you are and what you know, and people will respect that.
I have another question. I guess, what did your life look like upon graduating college, and what was like the application process like for you? And what would you say is like the most important in that process?
I guess we've established a pattern, which is very comfortable to women in STEM, let's face it. I was, again, kind of in accounting, and so it's a identifiable degree that you go, okay, there's these jobs, so you can kind of go, okay, play this or play that. So the university, and I came out of the University of Puget Sound, so it was a small school, small program. So, it was just going through, and it was really about finding that first opportunity. But I'm going to share a little bit more on that as I have looked at other opportunities. Most of them were, like I said, either within Weyerhaeuser or then when I went to the port, was a lot of what I focused on was you look at the job and you break down the not the title or the description as much as the key attributes. and really break it down and take the time to then say, what experiences do I have that meet those? And what desires and passions do I have to spend my time in that area? And that does two things. It really helps you prepare as you interview to be able to articulate, because what you want to do is you want to make it easy for them. If you can say, hey, there's all these things you're looking for, and here's the things I've done that really line up, do the job for them. And I will tell you, even in times in Weyerhaeuser, and I learned this from another woman in Weyerhaeuser, I actually created a matrix, a document that if I interviewed, I would leave that with them and say, hey, there's things I always forget. Because like I said, if you can tell them how your experiences line up with what they're looking for, then that's going to make it easier for them to see how you could be successful in that.
Yeah, that's great. Something I noticed while my applications was opportunities can come from any person. Like, never underestimate any person in your network who might be like the next time they might be looking for someone of your skill set. You never know that. So for me, Success Center was very helpful, building that confidence. I recently graduated from Masters of Business Analytics program. And how I landed at Forum Solutions was through another nonprofit organization that was looking for interns, actually. I interviewed for them as interns, but turned out I already had experience as a full-time employee, and they hired me directly as a full-time employee. So that was amazing, and that's something I never expected of, and that's why I say never underestimate even a smallest connection that you have. And another thing that I noticed while applications, and again, which aligns with low confidence or imposter syndrome, was there is this survey or study that women don't apply until they feel 100% confident or they match 100% qualifications on the job, whereas men apply to a job even if they are more than 50% qualified, or if they match even 50% of those requirements on job. So that's the difference in our skills where we feel confident, and I would say even if you're matching 70%, that's a good trade-off between 50 and 100. I would say go for it, apply for that job, and as Erin mentioned very clearly, how your experience aligns with those requirements. The more important ones, I felt transferred from one job to another job role, even when I had certain career break in mind, with those transferable skills, those soft skills of how I'm able to apply the knowledge that I have, and even my learning that came from this new business degree.
Just another thing to add on to that, I actually had the benefit of having a very robust career services at Intel or at IU, and I got to intern before I went back full time, so it was a little bit of a different process. I don't know what's available here, but I would encourage you guys to take advantage of the resources you have there for sure. Any kind of reference or contacts with companies, if you can do interview or internships or even mock interviews or job shadows, that helps you get an idea of what the company's like and if you're going to enjoy working there and whatnot. So it's kind of a good way to test the waters. I did internships every summer in college. One was at a wealth management firm, and I found out I didn't want to do that. I learned a lot though, and so I think as much as you can get kind of experiences like that, it helps a lot. In terms of resume and job requirements, I've done probably 200 interviews at Amazon. It's kind of nuts. And I think that definitely your resume is your first foot in the door. So make sure that your resume is very well kind of written in star format, et cetera. I don't know, I'm sure there are workshops here that help with that too, because that's going to be how you just get your foot in the door to have the conversation. So I definitely pay attention to that as well.
Yeah, my getting into the job was very strange, so that's like a story for the side. So I'll leave that to the side. And instead, maybe answer part of what you're trying to get to, which is, what are we looking for, right? So I've hired a lot of people in my lifetime. So one thing that I'm looking for is that the organization that you're interviewing for. So I find it shocking that even people coming through with the resume process, when they get into Infoblox, which has an insane number of interviews to get hired, as well as intelligence test type things. The number of people who come into that interview not knowing what our tech company does is shocking. So that's a write-off. It is good if you know a little bit about the person that you're interviewing with, so you can get some degree of relationship. I have had somebody, a man, say to me, "I've seen your Latvian knitting designs." That's on the stalker side. So I would balance it between like, I know your papers and not like I know your personal stuff. But that really does make a difference, right? And remember, the other thing that I usually will just write people off is if they've had, for us, you would maybe have like 6 or 7 interviews easily. If you've had 3 interviews before you come to talk to me and you don't know who you interviewed with, what their names were, it's pretty much, you're not going to go further with me. So those are some of the just like little easy things that I think are pretty important, particularly at least for someone like myself and how I make a hiring decision.
So, wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I mean, I was blown away by your authenticity, by your candor, your sense of humor, and for volunteering to be MC. I was so inspired. I'm sure everybody else was. So this concludes our panel. So thank you very much. Wow.
Thank you.